You are listening to the IAMKAYPEE podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the IAMKAYPEE podcast, and today's guest is Darren Loki McGarvey.
How you doing? Thanks for having me.
I'll let it in the round of applause later on.
Nice one. I'm actually just trying to be very professional and turn my phone onto silent so that our discussion is not interrupted.
Well, it's usually me that rudely gets interrupted by my old man. Always phones me. He has a sixth sense for when I'm doing a podcast and always calls me during it. So I've had to turn off like everything.
I can relate to that. Basically, if I want my fiance to contact me, what I'll do is I'll grab a lot of shopping and go directly to a till. And in the process of paying for that, I can expect a phone call from her.
It's just always at the most inappropriate time. I think, like parents have always got that sixth sense with their kids to sort of make their day worse.
How can I be annoying?
So just to give some sort of pretext to this all, like how did you go from Darren McGarvey to Loki, like as a Scottish rapper? And most people don't even know there is Scottish rap to those who are not in the know.
Exactly. No, that's a good question. The name Loki actually comes from Norse mythology. It's been popularised in recent years through the MCU, the Marvel Universe, one of the big villains early on being the Loki character. So Loki, Thor, that's all Norse mythology, kind of Scandinavian myth, basically. And so he's the god, well, not he, Loki's the god of mischief. He's a transgender, mischief-making, best friend to some, worst enemy to others type of anti-hero. And, at a time in my life where I was very young, I had just left home, I was on my own, dealing with a lot of issues, and I had come across this character in a film called Dogma, and I just liked the way it sounded. And then the more I looked into it, he was quite unhinged. He wasn't a bad guy, but he was quite unhinged, and I related to it. So I started writing poetry under that name kind of privately.
Okay.
And then when I went into the hip hop scene, I sort of adopted the name.
So
and it really caught on.
So the name sort of was before you start to write and when you were starting to get into hip hop.
Yeah,
cool.
It just became this way for me to, I don't know, I guess kind of refresh my sense of who I was.
Yeah.
I came with a lot of baggage as Darren, and when I left Pollock and everything that I knew, I was living closer to the city centre and I supported accommodation, and I liked the idea of just not necessarily assuming the role of a character. I was authentic. Yeah. But I liked the idea of just setting who I thought I was aside and trying to kind of make a name for myself in the hip hop community, which requires a lot of different attributes that maybe I wouldn't have been expressing so openly in Pollock, because, there's a script you need to stick to in a housing scheme, and if you diverge from it, then you're in trouble.
How did you what sort of pushed you into the hip hop scene?
Well, my dad had noticed that I was interested in making beats. I didn't necessarily know that they were hip hop. It was just like drag and drop samples on computer programs like Acid and stuff like that at home. My dad's a musician, so we had equipment at home. And then also me and my mates would mess around and write these kind of what ultimately were raps. But we would write about people in school. I used to satirise, the bullies and all that in school, and make videos and take them in and show them to the class and all that. And it was just a bit of a wind-up merchant in that way. And rap was another medium. Really, at first it was comedy that we were doing. Right. But then I actually started realising I'm actually all right at this, because it's word-based, and writing was my big strength, Okay. And then when I got into the hip-hop community, it was an education for me, because like you say, I realised then that there was a whole hip-hop history in Scotland that had started in the kind of late 80s. Right, okay. Where young working class kids got into breakdancing because of, films like Beat Street and, the big hip hop documentaries that have become quite iconic. And also hip hop for the first time was being played on international radio. So really I realised, wow, I'm part of a bigger wheel here. And that was it. Honing my style, finding an audience. And
you were saying writing's like your forte. Were you good at English in high school, or?
It was my strongest subject, English and drama.
Okay. That's the low-key side coming out on you.
Aye, well, English and drama. I mean, I was acting was really the first thing I was into. Acting, art. You know, I have a lot broader interests than maybe what I'm known for might suggest. But the thing I was into, comedy, acting, writing,
Yeah.
and those skills were definitely transferable to rap, because rap is a performance. When you're in the booth, when you're on a stage, it's a wee bit more intense than singer-songwriters type of stuff. And it's also more literal. You're more vulnerable because you're really saying what you think and feel and where you're at in life. And I just found that tremendously cathartic.
Yeah.
Because you didn't have to conceal your true feelings and metaphors if you didn't want to. You could just say, I'm having a shit day. Here's how I feel. And just kind of like dump it on the listener.
Because you're kind of, well, you are a social commentator now. Do you think that's the natural extension of it? Because in hip hop, you have to sort of dissect your surroundings and then talk about it and then speak about your experiences as a young person.
Absolutely. I mean, all rappers are social commentators, whether they realise it or not. They're either actively commentating or they're passively commentating. And by that, I mean, some rappers will approach a song and write about the dynamics of their community and their place in it and be very deliberate about that. Others won't approach music like that, but one of the byproducts of whatever it is they express, you can learn a lot about where they come from. So take, grime, for example, now, which is kind of an extension of rap in a way.
Yeah.
Although it's culturally distinct from hip hop. And, a lot of there's lots of different types of grime out there, but the style that's been popularised so far in the mainstream is the kind of aggressive, braggadocious, violent young man. Now, a lot of those young guys aren't necessarily intending to make a social comment about the conditions of their environments. But when I watch them talking about the opportunities that are available to them, talking about the strife they're engaged in communities, the running battles, the engagements with police, I'm learning a great deal about where they live, how they see themselves, how well they've been educated formally, and also the education that they've received in the street, which is, not insignificant and can be very valuable. So, we're all social commentators and function, many of us function like journalists in a way.
I think especially in Scotland, because if you're sort of flash and not really talking about your true experiences, it's not going to bode very well for your career in Scotland, because people are just going to see through it. So I guess you'd have to be quite raw and talk and connect with people on that level. Absolutely.
But then there is also there are glass ceilings for musicians of different backgrounds, right? So there are glass ceilings for musicians who come from an ethnic background, ethnic minority background, sorry. Everyone comes from an ethnic background. At least they do now. I don't know if the rules have been changed. I'm sorry if they have.
At least according to this moment in time.
Yeah, exactly.
And the facts
As
we
of
have.
now, everyone comes from an ethnic background. Women deal with music industry different. Their pathways into it and the barriers they face are different. For Scottish rappers, then there is, on one hand, there's the fact that if you're not making commercial music, there might be a ceiling there, but also the regional aspect of the dialect is problematic.
Yeah.
Not just commercially, but for a lot of people culturally. Now, this is something that we've made a lot of progress on. I just had a documentary on BBC Scotland a couple of months ago, 30 minutes, a very concise attempt to explain. A very concise attempt to explain, in an entertaining way, the evolution of hip hop from the pioneering generation in the 80s and 90s up to the present day, and actually, I think we're at a point now where it's becoming more accepted, and that often people who get into rap and who are interested in it, if they don't rap in their own accent, that's now become uncool.
Yeah.
So actually, as much as you might get ridiculed for the general public at certain points, they don't actually know what's cool.
Yeah.
They're waiting for they're waiting for Chris Moyles or someone to tell them what's cool.
Yeah.
Whereas, people who are really into it, they're really engaged and passionate, and they should never be ashamed of that.
I think there could be sort of some props given to some Scottish bands that sung in their Scottish accent as well, and then had a great success, like Frightened Rabbit, Biffy. They did it as well.
Absolutely, and even Proclaimers and Arab Strap. I mean, even Arab Strap in particular, the sort of rhythmic nature of those lyrics and almost were rapping, although I know a lot of it was not necessarily spoken word in the sense that it doesn't conform to poetry. It's almost like a stream of consciousness, a lot of that stuff. But yeah, just sort of laying the groundwork really for people to hear the Scottish accent, because it's one thing reading it off the page. It's another thing hearing it and really kind of contending with it. And I feel that when we use our own accents, it means that we're more connected to the material as well. It's just, it's better to perform it because you're not adopting a character. If you were to rap in an American accent but you don't speak in one, or an English accent but you don't speak in one, something's getting lost in translation as it's being expressed.
Yeah. And I think one of the other issues as well is because in Scotland, you can go 50 miles away from another place and it's a completely different Scottish accent. So then there's a multitude of Scottish accents that people are having to contend with if they're rapping in them.
I think also that helps. It's in hip hop, your regional origins are very important to your authenticity. So, you know, if you look at it back through classic hip hop tunes, people representing, you know, the South Bronx, the South Bronx, and this big debate in New York about where did hip hop originate, and so that's carried, you know, into other forms of hip hop. People kind of rep their ends or their bit or where they're from, and because there are specificities regionally as much as there's a lot of commonality, and I think that makes culture more diverse, more vibrant, less homogenous.
Yeah.
But also sometimes it takes a while for the kind of powers that be and the media and the general public, therefore, to really appreciate the depth of skill and talent and also what these insights regionally bring to bear and culture for everyone to learn from. But it's a long process, and I'm just part of the evolution really of hip hop in Scotland.
And is it the scene sort of still Glasgow centric? Because I know for a while it was based around Glasgow, obviously, because the music scene generally is. Is hip hop still like that, or is it spreading across Scotland?
Every single region, and I learned this even more when I put out the documentary, has a claim to being part of the pioneering generation of this, right? So in our documentary, there were some people that we couldn't cover, we couldn't interview, or some people we should have interviewed, but they declined. They don't want to be involved with the BBC, or the schedule didn't work out. So when we completed the film and we put it out, there was this kind of tiny microcosm of a backlash from within the hip hop community. Now that's natural. When there's scarce resources and a lot of people feel that they've not been acknowledged for their work, and then they see something on TV, it can be hard sometimes to see that bigger picture. You know, when Young Fathers won the Mercury Music Prize, some of us were like, people are saying that's Scottish hip hop. and then actually it turned a lot of attention onto Scottish hip hop, because the first thing a music journalist is going to do when an act like that wins is they're going to want to do a local piece that's all about this culture that this band came from. And so then a lot of us are getting media calls to talk about our own work because of it. And so you've got those dynamics regionally, but in Scotland, every region, particularly the urban centres, you know, whether it's cities or large towns, there's always going to be a hip hop head in there somewhere. Somebody, you know, a vinyl collector, a turntablist, a graffiti artist, a rapper, you know, a breaker. And so while obviously the big city centres are where a lot of the activity happens, because there's more economic activity, club nights, promoters, there's infrastructure, then I would stop short of saying that the scene revolves around what's happening in Glasgow. Although being from Glasgow, I have to represent and say I do think that the Glasgow hip hop scene, if we were all to congregate somewhere, do you know what I mean, like Bannockburn or something, and just throw down, put our best artists forward to battle each other, I don't see who's going to take Glasgow out, to be honest.
That sounds like you're trying to call out a war in the hip hop artist.
Well, I've got
community.
quite a good history of battling in Edinburgh, to be fair.
Right, okay. Do you come here often through Edinburgh? Out with
I mean, especially for work.
For
work. I mean, I'm in and out of here all the time now. My old publisher was here. My former newspaper that I worked for was here. And I'm often here for events, conferences, public speaking. And I'm through for the Fringe, obviously, all through August. So I'm here at least once a week, you know. And I enjoy it. It's good getting the camaraderie and the banter between Edinburgh and Glasgow. But I mean, really, it's a battle over what is the most overrated city.
Well, I've always grew up going to Glasgow because I've got some family that live in the Easter House. And once I started getting into music, I played a lot in Glasgow. So I always generally preferred Glasgow, but coming to Edinburgh now in my later life, I see the other side of it, and I appreciate both sides. Do you see any sort of like is there big differences now, or do you think it's becoming all, like you say, homogenized?
Well, Glasgow and Edinburgh are very distinct. First of all, and there's lots of reasons for that. Glasgow's wealth initially was what came out of industries of shipping and steel and manufacturing. Edinburgh, it was more textiles, and also it became a financial centre in the last kind of couple of 100 years.
Yeah.
And so that's the different types of economy straight away. So culturally, there's going to be a different expression there. In Glasgow, the middle class and the poor kind of live cheek by jowl almost sometimes. Yeah. You can turn a corner and suddenly you're like, oh wow, I'm in a posh bit, or I've just walked out of a scheme. Whereas in Edinburgh, the centre is kind of fortified. So if you actually look at a map of Edinburgh, you can draw almost a ring around all the deprived communities that exist on the outside, and that same ring is where you get all the uptake for the prisons, all the uptake for criminality. That's where you find most of that sort of activity. Also, I think if you live in certain parts of Edinburgh, it's possible to travel to and from the city centre without necessarily even laying eyes on a deprived communities. Yeah. There are just sort of little corridors, you know. Also, as many kids live in poverty in Edinburgh as go to an independent school, which shows a real kind of stark ravine of inequality there. And I've visited some of the independent schools, so the calibre of education kids are receiving there because they're financially resourced is just mind-blowing. Yeah. I mean, these places are designed to maximise human potential and everything. The architecture, the layout, the grounds, the curriculum, everything. It's all about how can we design this around every individual child to bring the best out of them. Whereas state schools tend to be more designed around the financial constraints of the local authority and the government. So there are lots of interesting dynamics that are very specific to Edinburgh for the reasons that I've discussed. But obviously, common problems include social inequality, excess culture, an over-reliance on retail and consumerism to generate economic activity. And
the Fringe itself, you know, that is a big difference from Glasgow.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have anything really that compares to that, but neither does any city in the world.
It's pretty individual.
It's a global success story, the Edinburgh Fringe. Obviously, there are issues around it in terms of the accessibility of it, not just for working class people, but, you know, I was in a venue last year where we were struggling to get people in who were in using wheelchairs, and there are issues to be ironed out around that. What we do know is it generates a vast amount of wealth. It generates a vast amount of economic activity, and
a vast amount of hatred towards tourists as well. From the local people.
It's interesting, isn't it? Like, it's interesting because one of the things I find interesting, I'm sure somebody will point out why this is not the right analysis to make. You know, obviously there's a big discussion just now around immigration, right? And depending on what your view is, you could be characterised as, you know, loony lefty or a fascist or a right winger or whatever. But what I've actually find is that there are certain cases where people on the left who are sympathetic to migrants and refugees and who fight for their rights to be able to remain here. At the same time, they get quite rightly aggressive and upset about tourism, which is another form of immigration in a sense, or student flats, you know, gentrification and things of that nature.
It's funny, I've never thought of that comparison, but it's great.
Well, it's probably problematic in some way. I'm sure someone will point it out. It's just what it tells me is that we all sometimes feel an impact when there are spikes in the population. Yeah. That when there is limited resources or limited physical space and more people come in, whether it's for a couple of days or whether it's for a couple of years, then an impact is felt, and that impact is mediated through lots of personal, subjective feelings about the matter. Do you know what I mean? And we all get a bit irritated when we feel a wee bit like everybody's in my space and I'm highly caffeinated and very stressed.
Especially in Edinburgh, where it's not designed for that many people. Like you were saying, it's hard to get people in with special needs access into these old pubs and clubs because it's just not. These are ancient buildings that are not designed that way. Even driving through Edinburgh is not even designed for cars. You know. And that's
I often feel like just galloping in on a horse.
Well, you can do that if you want.
Yeah, I don't think I'll get very far.
Austerity right there.
Yeah, totally, man. But no, you're right. I think because when you arrive in the centre of Edinburgh, you very much feel like you're in a living museum. I mean, it's unique in Scotland and in the UK in that way. I mean, there are some cities in the UK or towns that are similar, but not in the sort of scale of Edinburgh. I mean, you have whole stretches of, particularly down the kind of Royal Mile and all that, where you really are walking around streets that have been there for centuries.
Longer than some people's countries, you know.
Exactly. And, you know, and that's great, but there are obviously problems making accommodations for people. And obviously the closer to the city centre that you want to live, the more expensive it is. And then you've got Airbnb,
which is a huge problem for a lot of people.
It's just because there's a very serious housing crisis on the news. So the idea that a lot of places are just sitting empty, so that you can get a kind of cheap holiday, is quite vulgar for some people. I mean, I did an episode of my series on in Edinburgh, and you know, some of the stuff that's going on around housing is truly shocking. Private landlords being asked by the government to provide temporary accommodation to homeless women and children.
Right, okay.
And there's damp on the windows, and the kid's sick from the condensation, and she's got a letter from the doctor, and it's £750 a month to live there.
That's insane.
You know, and so the government are covering that.
Right, okay.
Through housing benefits and things like that.
Is this the Scottish government?
Yeah. But the same practice is widespread all over the UK. I mean, this is one of the bulwarks of the system.
Yeah, it's an
stuck.
indicative of the bigger issue, which is the government as a whole. Yeah,
there just isn't enough social housing. So obviously, when a certain resource becomes scarce, the value goes up.
Yeah,
you know. And that's the same with Uber as it is with houses. Yeah. You know, if everyone wants an Uber, then it's twice the price. You might pay 60 quid to get from Waverley to the bottom of Princes Street, you know.
What's sickening about that actually is, you probably heard about it, but the times they've jacked the prices up in times of crisis, like that is just disgusting to hear that. Yeah, and also the way that we're told about the market, it's almost just like it's this algorithm that just functions of its own volition, and that humans can't modulate it in any way. You know, it's just the market decides. The market decides. There are specific ways that we can put reins on it if we recognise that there are human needs that are coming secondary to profits and business. Yeah. I'm not saying burn it all down. I want fucking Marxism right now. I don't like my trainers. I don't like Starbucks. You know, I like all these things. I'd be a hypocrite to say I don't enjoy aspects of a capitalist society. Well, there is an issue. Like, these are bastardized forms of like democracy, bastardized forms of capitalism. These are not ones that expand and contract with technology and all these things. These are things that are rigid structures that are made not to move. Yeah. And that's what's going to happen. It's going to shatter, or we have to evolve and do something about it. Absolutely. And I mean, historically, I think often society reaches a cliff edge moment, and then that's when the more powerful players in the equation realise, actually, we're going to have to make a concession. Yeah. You know, in America, that was the New Deal, where basically it was the first integration of communism into the American system. It was saying, actually, we can't have free markets and all that. We're going to have to invest in infrastructure and employ Americans to work, because the Great Depression has wiped out jobs, and that was all a financial crisis that caused that. You know, speculators, and you know, a couple of hundred years ago, speculators were hung for that sort of behaviour. But when the bankers get a grip on the politics of things, they're like, why don't we change this? And why don't we change that? And I think over here, it's similar when, you know, when
we instituted the welfare state and the NHS. That was a recognition that
It's like
too many people were
yeah.
too many people were sick, too many people were unwell, and that we had to somehow keep them stable until work surfaced for them.
It's like once the population gets to a certain size, the government is going to have to look after them. You know, it's just, that's a fact. But a lot of people are not interested in big government. My personal idea is I'm not scared of globalism. Maybe the idea of how people put it forward, it sounds scary, but I think that we need to sort of not be like, it shouldn't be a dirty word, globalism. I think we should have less interference from government, but I think there should be sort of more like a world sort of government. It's hard when it goes from place to place. There's going to be differences in culture. I think those barriers will break down more the more we become connected through things like the internet. But
Globalism, obviously, globalism has always existed for as long as we've been able to travel, you know, intercontinentally to some extent, you know, transferring culture, transferring knowledge, obviously imperialism.
Yeah.
These are all kind of forms of globalism. The idea of the globalism just now that's kind of ascending and that's really under a lot of scrutiny is this idea that we can kind of formalise it in institutions.
Yeah.
And integrate politically nation states
and capitalise it as well.
Aye, well, I think that's been the big problem with globalism, is that it's being led by multinationals.
Yeah.
And multinationals, they're only written into their DNA is to preserve profits for shareholders. So until governments can rewrite or hack the DNA of a corporation and say, you also have to consider the environment, you've got to pay your employees well, the more countries that can agree on setting those kind of incentives and then saying to corporations, you can get a tax cut once you meet all these requirements, then that's sort of globalism I'm into. I would be right up for that. You know, it's nice being able to, I mean, can't do it for much longer, but it's nice being able to travel, you know, go to France, go into Spain, wherever you want to go, really, in Europe, and there's not a lot of friction.
No.
But obviously, because it's being led by the interests of business, then a lot of people have been kind of left out of the prosperity and they're pissed off.
It's amazing that we've not had some more issues than we've had recently because of what the internet's done to sort of expose everyone to each other. You know, like I think we've started to navigate to slightly easier, but like literally overnight, we were all just able to talk to each other and say things, and cultures are sort of impacting against cultures.
Yeah.
I'm surprised there was not more sort of friction.
I don't think we've really seen we haven't really seen technology having this profound an impact on the human species since perhaps the invention of the printing press, or, you know, and what's led to, you know, things like the Reformation and the Bible being printed and these utopian assumptions about if everyone has the word of God, society will be utopia. You know, this idea that we wouldn't polarize it. And so, you know, I think that kind of Silicon Valley, this idea of social networks, a lot of people in Silicon Valley thought that they were the first people to create social networks. But actually, social networks is how human beings evolve and communicate historically. Yeah. What Google and these big tech companies do is they speed all that up, but then they put in profit motives and advertising algorithms, which serve to drive up their own business models. And really, it's our attention spans and our kind of cognitive bandwidth that's for sale. Yeah. And in those dynamics, I don't know how beneficial that's going to be for democracy, for human well-being. But it's like all of the problems that we currently face right now. We are dealing with a society that we're not evolved individually to process the vast quantities of information of social media. Is just an overload. So we seek these simple narratives to feel secure. And that's what we've always done. I mean, there's not much difference evolutionarily speaking between us and the very first humans that evolved. Yeah. You know,
there's nothing really.
Language really is the only thing that we've acquired and developed that's distinct. And funnily enough, that's the most recent acquisition, but that's the one that we're trying to use to solve all the problems. You know, like
It's crazy.
we're trying to argue with people we're never going to meet, never going to talk to.
Yeah.
We don't know anything about them, can't read their body language. We just want to use text and a screen to figure out everything about them. And it's no wonder that we just feel like we're banging our head against a wall, really. But
the keyboard.
that's what happens when you give multinationals a blank check.
Yeah.
It's the same with what's happening with the environment. It's the same with what's happening with food poverty. It's the same with what's happening with the food industry, with all the crap and the junk and the unethical practices.
Yeah.
When you just give corporations a blank check, say, you go and take a lot of burden off the state by sorting out everybody's needs, and there's no risk assessment performed. Now we're dealing with obesity crises, mental health crises, opioid crises. All of these find their origins in the corporate model of organising a society.
One of the reasons I wanted to bring you on was obviously you've got your show at the Fringe, but in the last couple of days you've been super busy because of the release of the Scottish drug death stats.
Yeah.
Which is quite, it's very stark, looking at them.
Yeah. In 2018, 1,187 people perished. Vast majority of them through accidental overdose caused by what's referred to technically as polydrug use, which is long-term use of multiple substances. Combination of things like heroin, morphine, methadone.
Methadone's like the half of the stats.
Yeah.
So it's like a combination of like heroin and methadone, which is crazy.
So people using on top of their methadone, which tells you straight away the methadone program's not working for a lot of people. And then the streets have been flooded, not with just illicit drugs, but drugs that are dangerous. Drugs that interact with the other substances in the poly-drug use picture that create the circumstances for, organ failure and difficulties breathing and respiratory, all sorts of issues. So to put it in its proper context, that amount of people dying is equivalent to 5 Lockerbie bombings, right? It's equivalent to 50 or so 7/7s. It's in 3 years, if these trends continue, more people will have died from drugs in Scotland than everyone who perished in the September the 11th attacks.
Oh,
so this is a national emergency. If human mortality is a metric that our government uses to assess what sort of health our society is in, unfortunately, the drug addicts, they lead such chaotic lives and are often such a nuisance to their communities, to their families, to the services that are trying to help them, that they don't inspire a great deal of sympathy or faith in the general population. So you have pockets of people who feel they understand the issue more and call for compassion, and drug addicts are humans and we need to, be kinder and gentler. Yeah. But that message just washes over a lot of people. And I can understand to a degree why, but also that sort of public opinion is what gives politicians the space not to take the more radical approach.
One of the sad things to see was I lived in Dundee, the city of Dundee, and one of the sort of stats that was coming from there is it's some of the highest death rates in this in the stats that were released. And it's sad to see that, but it's probably no coincidence that historically the most working class backgrounds are the ones that have the highest sort of rate of these drug issues. Yeah,
when the statistics are published, a lot of people refer to the demographic that's most acutely affected by this as the Trainspotting Generation. So the argument is that these people have been using drugs for so long and they're getting older, so their bodies aren't as resilient, and this is why they're dying all of a sudden. And maybe once they're all dead, then the statistics will kind of plateau in some way. I don't necessarily completely disagree with that, but the Trainspotting Generation umbrella term kind of obscures what's really going on, which is that in the last 20 or 30 years, those people who were originally on heroin went either from heroin to methadone, which is a state-sanctioned harm reduction strategy,
prescribed,
or to powerful benzodiazepines, jellies, moggies they're called.
Right.
These drugs produce such strong feelings of wellness and euphoria, and just pleasant feelings of love and everything a human being wants to experience, and they become highly addictive. And so actually, in conjunction with those drugs being more tightly controlled, counterfeit drugs flooding the market to replace them, the aging drug population, as well as austerity, creating problems in housing and creating issues around how people get their income. You've created a perfect storm, really, for a system that produces death and despair as a byproduct for people who are at a certain low, excluded level. And I hope that these deaths will not be forgotten in the public, because if they are, the politicians will respond by doing the minimum that they can do.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about needing perhaps decriminalisation here, but also...
Because I was going to ask you, just to lead on from what I think you were going to say, like a lot of peoples are talking about the issues and what possibly is wrong with this, because it's multifaceted. Like you're saying, it's all contributes to what's happening in our society, but barely anyone really talks about what we should do to help these people that are in need.
Yeah, I mean, if someone put me in charge of it today, the first thing that I would do is I would bring people in the different recovery communities who've experienced addiction into the heart of the conversation. Lived experience isn't a panacea to solve all problems, right? You can't deal with a complex problem by just relying on the viewpoint of one section of the population. But the lived experience brings to bear so much nuance within what we already know statistically that it really fills out the gaps in the knowledge of the experts who haven't viscerally experienced addiction. I mean, one of the reasons why someone gets sober, the main reason they get sober, it's not just because they get support. It's not just because people tell them they need to get sober. They see someone else getting sober and they begin to conceptualize what sobriety might look like for them. So that's the catalyst. Seeing someone else do it, having that model to you, and then moving forward with the correct support in place. So that tells you straight away how important lived experience is at the heart of this issue.
Yeah.
People don't get sober without examples of other people who get sober. How can you create a drug policy that doesn't have lived experience in the mix? People consulting on it.
Yeah.
Just now you have a situation where drug addicts or recovered addicts are often kind of brought in tokenistically into public realm for discussion, and then they're sent back to their charities or they're sent back to wherever they come from, and the politicians get on with the decisions. So that's the first thing that I would do. I would also look at making more investment in residential rehabs, not necessarily to take people out of the community, but a period of isolation from the environments and the social connections that are driving your using can be very useful, particularly if you go into a community of other recovered addicts or people who are struggling. It doesn't need to be geographically that far away from where the people come from, but that would be a temporary measure, at least until we address the social conditions. So those are a couple of the things that I would do. And also, I mean, we've got to address the demand for these drugs. And I mean, this is very illiberal of me, but I would love to see police going in really hard on these dealers.
Right.
You know, we're not talking wee guys selling a bit of hash here. We're talking about people who are creating drugs that they know are killing people, and they're creating them cheaply, and they're selling them cheaply, and they're making a lot of fucking money. And that for me is just the lowest of the low. You know, why is it that the police can get the intelligence to go through somebody's door for growing a bit of weed in the loft? And you know, when currently the drug deaths from weed still stands at 0, and the police want to get online and to take pictures and all that, we seized 1.4 million worth of cannabis. And it's like, look, we're not interested in that, mate.
No.
You want to be going for the big guns, or if you can't go for them, come out on telly and release a statement about why. Tell us why. What is the thing about these people that's untouchable?
I mean, like, who reads that? That, like, oh, the police sees fucking 1 million of cannabis in Scotland. It's like, well, I'm glad that's off the bloody streets. Like, no one wants to pat a policeman on the back for that. I mean, there'll be someone out there, but these are not the real issues that need to be tackled. Like, this is not representative of what it is actually like. it's almost as if people are not based in reality about what's actually affecting us. And it's just all for show. Like, oh, we'll put this in the newspaper just to make it seem like we're doing something.
Aye. And they are doing something, but it's just a misappropriation of resources.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you look at that 1.1 million figure, if that was actually if that was actually like a business, then you're talking about how much would be getting, 30% of that would be taxed. And so that would be 300 grand in the public purse.
Yeah. It's a lot
300
of money.
grand that could be invested in residential rehabs. It could be training people with lived experience to rise the ranks in the various professions that are currently dominated by people who don't come from those kind of backgrounds.
Yeah.
All sorts of things that you could do. No, I don't mean to oversimplify it. I know politically these things are very challenging.
Yeah.
But, and I know that not everyone who gets into drug dealing or moves in that world, they're not all ethically the same. Some people have a genuine passion for the cultivation of cannabis.
Yeah.
And they understand it the way that a botanist understands, their plants. And I don't think that we should be throwing these people in prison and seizing the money that they've made when there is as much social harm caused by the sale of refined sugar and alcohol for society. And if you're correlating that cost, you've got to have a level playing field, really.
And it's also the sort of hypocrisy of some politicians as well. Like, we know they're investing in cannabis farms down south, and then for them to sort of back laws that put people in jail just for growing this plant. I mean, it's tiresome to talk about cannabis. You feel like you're just this stoner guy that's, a conspiracy theory laden stories, but it's not. It's like real things, and that's not even taken into the medicinal aspect of the byproducts of cannabis as well at the same time, which has been seen across, like, Portugal legalized everything. We're talking about decriminalization. One of the biggest proponents of decriminalization is Portugal. They just said, we're going to make everything legal, and then I think they invested money into sort of rehabilitating.
They actually said this is a pot of money that's going directly to this. So it's quite a radical approach, which shows that, they're modelling a way to do it that we can learn from. In Scotland, we don't have all of the levers at our disposal to do something like that. But we still have enough power devolved to do something about it. The drug death statistics being so high in Scotland is partly, I think, to do with, as you had indicated, the dependence on the industrial era to give our communities cohesion, social connections, and formal social controls that give people in a community an expectation of how they should live, a sense of purpose and shared identity, which human beings need to function. You rip out the heart of a community and replace it with Frankie and Benny's. What the fuck do you expect is going to happen? Do you know what I mean? What do you expect is going to happen to some people? And then the other aspect is that this is like a fire that has leaped from one building to another building and become self-generating. So you've got the addiction issues, and you've got the people dying, and then the fire leaps to another structure and just starts becoming self-sustaining. Every time an addict dies, other addicts are impacted by that. They know the people who are dying. 3 die every day. So there's a shadow of grief and then fear hanging over them. What happens when people die? What's the first thing everybody does? They go for a drink. They go and get pissed. They probably have drink too much the whole week before the funeral. They get pissed at the funeral. They have a few days after that. It's practically like that week between Christmas and New Year where you just don't give a fuck. You're just like, pour the toffee coins directly down my esophagus. Do you know what I mean? Because that's what happens when we deal with
self-medicating.
Exactly. So when drug addicts are in the problem they're in because they already struggle to deal with reality and emotions, then when they're actually dealing with their friends and family dying of drug addiction around them, of course their using is going to increase. So they become high risk. And I believe that has a part to play in why the figures are so high. And I think we're going to see that trend continue down south. We might just be, unfortunately, pioneers. We Scots love to pioneer shit, So here we go. We had the Enlightenment, now we've got the drug death capital of Europe.
And it's, I mean, if there was 3 Glaswegians down in the centre of Glasgow by stabbing every single day, it would be completely mortifying.
And that was the case not long ago when we developed a long-term public health approach to the problem that involved not just criminal justice, but looking at violence like a disease that behaves like a disease almost at the level of culture. And unfortunately, when the news is reported in the way it is, and there's a relentless focus on the individual choices of addicts, while I'm not saying responsibility and self-efficacy are not important, and certainly are very important when you move into recovery, this has to be done in baby steps. People are often applying the range of choices and the ability to assess those choices that they enjoy to everybody else.
Okay.
When actually a drug addict, the range of choice is this, their ability to assess the choice is this.
Right.
And then they've got a head that's telling them, you can't do anything until you use. Every addict that dies, the last thing that they thought when they took the hit that killed them was, I'm going to do something about this tomorrow.
Right, okay.
Like, and then they die.
I mean, it's just obviously the public perception of all this as well. How do you change stigma towards people who, I think there's sort of like two things at play as well, and it's the drug addiction and homelessness as well. Those things are so tightly, you know, wound together that it's hard to sort of extrapolate what really, if you affect one, do you affect the other? You know,
well, in society, we've got a way of partitioning things off from one another in order to focus on a specific problem. Even if you look at poverty, so you have how many different types of poverty are there? There's fuel poverty, there's food poverty, there's housing poverty, there's in-work poverty. It sort of creates the sense that, you know, everybody's affected by one form of poverty, when actually, if you're poor, all of these forms of poverty are converging on your mind every single day, on your finances every day. So when we're talking about social problems like drug addiction and homelessness and antisocial behaviour and crime, what we're talking about is that's just like a field of experience that people are going through all of it when they're socially excluded. And so the person who's begging on the street, the person who's up in court for shoplifting, the kid who used to be on a children's panel, the addict, the dealer sometimes as well, these are all the same person at different stages of social exclusion.
Right.
But the way that we currently assess and measure everything that's going on, it sort of segregates it all in a way that's very difficult to see the full picture.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the big problems generally with understanding the scale of what we face in Scotland, which is that inequality, this inability to bring some of the wealth being generated and invest it back into our society is actually tearing our society down for everyone. For everyone. Everyone is affected. No matter how wealthy you are, at some point you're going to feel a repercussion for this, whether it's the people that you hate in politics getting in charge, somebody like Farage, you know, just like becoming more and more powerful. Liberals love that, you know. So it's just this is an issue that could be our undoing, and we need to try and get on top of it. Yeah,
it's like we've got we're distracted by all these divisive issues, and then we're not taking a look behind us and to see the structure of everything's falling apart.
Obviously, it's easy for us to say that, you know, because we can conceptualize it and discuss it in terms of we're not accountable, really. Yeah. When a politician or someone sets about a problem, they have to break it down into increments. So they can't say, right, let's fix society today, everybody get round, what will we do? They've got to say, let's look at the economy. They've got to say, let's look at poverty. They've got to break it down. But I think all of the institutions and frameworks that emerge from all of these separate conversations just become so distinct sometimes from one another that we don't even have the mechanisms to see the whole thing in its totality. Yeah. And I think seeing it in that broader view, what's potentially coming over the horizon line might focus minds a wee bit. If someone could find a way to express that this is bigger than one type of poverty or one type of exclusion or one social problem, these are all symptoms of a deeper malaise in society, where on one hand we have people in charge who haven't experienced what the rest of the society is going through. And so they're imposing a kind of public school tough love approach that worked for them onto everyone else, and really holding people with the least to standards that they have never been held to. You You know, like whenever a person up here gets caught out, there's always some parliamentary privilege or opaque legal personality to hide behind. There's always a phone call to a lawyer and a publicist to figure out how to navigate. If you turn up late for your benefit meeting, fuck you, you know. Or
you're out.
You know that.
That's
Like,
if you don't have a computer to book it, like you're not allowed to go into these places to book your meeting as well.
You can't be poor if you have a phone, but you need an internet to access benefits.
Yeah.
That's the sort of contradiction that can only manifest when a system's being presided over by people who don't have a clue. But because they speak a certain way and they look a certain way, we think that they must know what they're doing because they're very wealthy and they're very posh.
Well, one of the things that is my pet peeve is maybe if the system does it from within, but the people that end up in the top of the places come from a specific school, you know, and are from a certain level of wealth as well. And it's like, how can these people relate to the people that they're presiding over, you know? And it's just, it doesn't work. It obviously doesn't work. It still hasn't worked for the last however many years. How do we change that? How do we put people in place that aren't career politicians and only come from a little posh school and called Eton, and then make it so where it is productive for society to have these people at the top?
Well, that's a big conundrum, isn't it? It's, you know, some people think you do it through kind of incremental reform and persuasion and consensus politics, because anything else requires an initiation of force in some way. Yeah. And then you have people,
anarchism.
And then you have people who say this is generational struggle, and every generation has to take up arms against the wealthy, and really force them to devolve power and wealth down the chute. Yeah. And this is something I've been exploring a lot, you know, in the show and in my book, because the last year for the success of the book and all the opportunities that I've enjoyed.
Safari Poverty.
Poverty Safari,
Poverty Safari,
so basically after it won the Orwell Prize, it was like everything went into overdrive. It was just most of the opportunities I got offered I had to turn down because there's not enough time in the day. It's
quite slightly ironic, not ironic, but apt that it was the Orwell the award that you won for the book. That's
absolutely, and it just changed everything overnight. So the irony for me is that I've always written from a perspective of poverty and exclusion,
because your theme is like sort of class as well. Like that's very thematic for you, obviously, because you're just writing from what you know.
Yeah, but now I've been given a seat at the table, public discourse, which is the centre ground. So the minute that you enter the centre ground, there's new expectations of how you should behave and how you should speak.
Right.
You have new interests. You establish new social connections. This begins to change who you are. And I'm going through that process, and I'm currently weighing up what do I want to change and what do I want to retain.
Yeah.
And what cost am I willing to bear for retaining certain things, and what compromises am I willing to make to remain in this place of social mobility. And one of the insights that you get immediately is that in the centre ground, it looks like everyone has enough. Everyone, you know, most people in the centre ground, they're in a profession of some sort, they make more than the average salary, they own homes, they're involved in you know, cultural leisure activities. Media is all designed to be consumed by them. And all the discussions about politics and culture are designed with them in mind.
Yeah.
But while obviously looking in from the left or working class communities, you will see people who look like they have enough. They don't feel like they have enough, because we live in an economy that is always telling us that we need to move to the next purchase. We need to acquire the next commodity. We need to express our prosperity and culturally and materially in loads of different ways. And because we live in a growth economy, so no one actually can say, okay, I've got enough, and just stop. And so this is what I've noticed in the last year, because I made a lot more money this year than I did previous years. But I've somehow overextended myself in a way that means that actually I've still got financial security in my mind.
Right.
And actually then I feel stupid for going and talking to my pals about it, because they actually have real problems. So then you talk to people in the centre, or the people who have made a bit more money, and then suddenly you start realising how you can become endeared in this other form of politics, which is not just about being civil and polite and reasonable and you know, not making big rash judgments in society, but taking baby steps. But it's also you grease the wheels of your own social mobility by behaving in that way. Yeah. So if you're nice to everyone, regardless of how they vote, and you don't pull up people, regardless of what they do, to a certain extent, it means there's more opportunities for you and you're not burning your bridges. Yeah. So there's a kind of fluidity to how you can move around.
So you have to navigate those waters. It must be like a lot more pressure now that you're at, like you say, you've got a seat at the table, you've got voice. Yeah. People listen to you as well, and you've got your book, you've got your show at the Fringe, and then you write the column as well. Is it the Daily Record?
Daily Record. So these are all Scotsman for 2 years as well.
And it's like, do you ever feel that you're going to get to a point where you get like a backlash for what you're saying?
I've had a lot of backlashes already, to be honest. The good thing is that most of the people who read this stuff, they probably wouldn't take the time to come and backlash against me. They're sitting in their house thinking he's a prick. That's fine. Yeah. Anybody who steps into the public domain is going to be putting themselves up for that. But I think what I'm observing and what I'm trying to document in my work currently is this transition I'm going through, because a lot of people go through it, but then they forget what it was like. So what you do is really, you start off with ideals. You start off with ideals about changing the world. You start off with principles about what you think this is and that is, and the next thing.
Quite black and white when you're sort of,
Well, yeah, starting. And then, but there's the transition. Yeah. So suddenly, when opportunities come and money comes and prestige comes, it's easy to dismiss these principles as immature. Yeah. Because retaining those principles means no access to the opportunities. So is this maturity, or is this an incremental concessions to your basic integrity? Really, is it selling out, or is it growing up? This is what I'm interested in, because a lot of the people that I meet who went through that transition years ago, they've really bought into the idea that they've been on a journey where their principles and politics have grown up and matured, which somehow perfectly aligns with their self-interest. Right, okay. And I think that's a very big coincidence. and so I feel like that is the interesting meat and potatoes of the political situation right now, because it's in the centre that people are frightened by radical ideas, because on one hand, a lot of middle class folk want a fairer society. They express those values all the time. But on the other hand, don't rock the boat too much, because they don't feel like they have enough. So talking about taxing them more scares them. Yeah. And I'm getting an insight into all of this. So it's creating interesting friction points and conflict for me to explore as a writer and an artist. And that's definitely what I'll be doing with the show and the book.
So your show, Scotland Today,
and stuff about me being middle class is the subtitle.
So is it just like all your sort of bringing all together information you've accumulated to this point and putting it into the Fringe show?
So it charts the journey of me from winning the Orwell Prize, and just, you know, that was the first time I travelled first class. It's the first time you travel first class.
Did you document it?
You feel like I wrote about it.
Oh, no way.
You feel like you're betraying someone. You feel like you're going to get caught. Do you know what I mean? It's like singing in the shower or something you might do that you would do that was embarrassing if someone seen you do it. Yeah. It was a bit like that. But then I started justifying it to myself in a certain way. And then I became aware that I was justifying it. I was like, so I've begun this journey now. And then the show sort of charts that. And it riffs on class, but from the other side of the ravine. So I've never explored class from the point of view of on paper being middle class. And I think that might be interesting for audiences. It might be cathartic for people who've often wondered about the transitions they've gone through. And also I think it will be in parts challenging for all members of the audience, depending on what their backgrounds are, but that should be. And also it's kind of self-deprecating and quite honest where I'm coming from. It's easy to say, you know, hold on to your principles, and you said you would never work for such and such, and you said that they people there are that and that and that, and then, you know, you have kids and you become responsible for them, and really they become a kind of bulletproof excuse for you to do whatever you want for your own self-interest.
I'm in first class because of my kids.
That's the thing, exactly. Do you know what I mean? Like, but these are all the justifications people cite, you know what I mean? When really, is that? I'm not saying don't do those things, but just be honest about why you're doing it.
You're obviously self-aware about it, so you can understand.
For how long though? For how long? That's why I'm trying to get it all down now. I'm trying to write the sort of show and the sort of book that I'm going to watch in a few years and go, oh my God, I can't believe I've done that.
Wait till you start making that Scrooge McDuck money where you're just like, I don't give a fuck.
Kill him.
But yeah, I think it's good for you to be able to do that, because not often someone from your background breaks through like that, and you're able to document it and truthfully talk about it, and it's like one of us sort of getting a seat at the table, and I think a lot of people think that way about you. They relate to you a lot, and a lot of other people.
And I'm hoping it's because of the honesty and the self-scrutiny as well as where I come from, because I'm not always going to be able to retain where I come from because I'm going through this transition. But the other last thing actually before I have to go, the success sometimes often it's like all people who enjoy success, it's attributed to them. They worked hard, they had the talent, they had the dedication, and that is true up to a point. Right? It's right that I should have got the opportunity to write a book if my competitor was in the pub every night talking about writing a book. That's fair, right? But there are other circumstances at play, and actually this notion of merit is taking too much of a hold in society, especially at the top, where people believe genuinely that they're there because they're worthy of being there, when actually the society that's all falling to bits around them is perhaps the most obvious evidence that there's something wrong with the people at the top. So in the show, I explore some of these ideas. I mean, in my last show, I went in really hard on the left and was really critical in my book of left-wing institutions, some aspects of left-wing politics, this idea that we have just given up on the concept of personal responsibility because it's offensive, aspects of identity politics, which I think more and more people on the left are now accepting, are not always helpful. And so this show, I think I lean a wee bit more into the right.
Right, okay.
And I say, these ideas of merit and personal responsibility can be useful in communities where there's something to conserve. That's why conservatism emerges. But where people don't have a lot and you don't understand how they live, imposing your politics and ideology might be unhelpful. And there's evidence all around us, whether it's Jeremy Kyle. Can you imagine Michael Gove going on Jeremy Kyle? Your mates trashed the fucking economy. You were getting full of Charlie while advocating harsh prison sentences.
The DNA results have come back. You are not human.
Exactly. And Jeremy Kyle himself, public school, publicly schooled.
It's almost cringy watching him berating these people like that when he's
a bit tough guy, and he can't talk to a working class person without a security guard 5 feet away
Big
from him.
Steve, aye.
Ridiculous.
They should have Steve do the.
I was saying this before, like Jeremy Kyle kind of comes across as this sort of cheeky chappy, pointed fucking moral arbiter tough guy, and actually, like in real life, he's the guy that kind of claps when a plane lands.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like in real life, do you know what I mean? That's what he is.
Right,
like he just is. Like if you just went, do you know what I mean? He would jump. He's not got any fortitude.
No.
Like that's why he's surrounded with security and he's pampered and he doesn't have a clue.
I think the worst I ever seen him was when he did the documentary where he was doing the South London gangs, and it was just I cringed the whole way through it. Just the way he acted, and there's a bunch of security guys with guns probably 5 feet away from the camera. And his whole show was based on Jerry Springer. So he was the guy who watched Jerry Springer use lower class America as a workhorse to drag television into a nightmarish moral gutter and thought, hold my beer. Do you know what I mean? Like that just shows you, like when we talk about merit and aspiration and all that, we're saying he is worthy, that he has aspiration, that he's successful. Look at what he's aspired to. No. His whole thing is bear baiting, and it would be great. It would be great to see Boris Johnson dragged onto a format like that and have his personal life, and his dirty underwear hung up for everybody to see and really be scrutinised on it and not have this option of saying, no, I don't want to talk about it. I know you're having it go soon. So people that have been on the show for the first time, I ask a couple of like different questions at the end. So, just a favorite movie that you've seen recently of all time.
Oh, favourite movie of all time. Right, favourite movie I've seen recently has got to be the kind of Infinity War Endgame, right? I'm big on those films. I know it's not the artist, no sophisticated thing to say. Can go down that route if you like as well. I like adaptation.
Yeah.
Charlie Kaufman wrote it, very meta textual analysis of the struggle of the writer.
Right.
And in the story, he tries to adapt a book into a screenplay.
Right, okay.
And then writes himself into it.
What's it called?
It's called Adaptation.
I think I've heard about that. Sorry.
So it's about him trying to write the thing, but then he writes himself into the movie. And so it's just a total masterclass in writing. And so I love that as well. That's the one that really jumps to mind right now.
For me, like I loved Endgame, but Infinity War I thought was a better movie.
Aye.
Just because it was in space.
But there are issues with some of the choices that were made with Endgame. They changed the Black Widow Hawkeye scene at the last minute in the reshoots because he was supposed to die, and that would have made a lot more sense. I don't know if they're going to pay that off by retroactively giving her more backstory.
Yeah.
Because it just didn't resonate with me when she died. And I thought that she wasn't celebrated in the right way having died. It was all about Tony Stark.
Yeah, it was.
I thought some of the decisions in the film, around the Hulk, I really wanted to see the Hulk hulking out and really battering Thanos a bit and just getting his own back.
That was the big one for me that I wanted to see was retribution for Hulk.
I know his big moment was that.
Yeah.
But it was just not the greatest decision. But then I'm able to sit and criticise it. Really, the culmination of what they managed to achieve in that film, paying off all these storylines, was really remarkable.
Yeah.
And I'm only writing a show for me in a book that's just me. So the idea that they would be writing with that whole tapestry in mind is remarkable.
It's hard.
But it's not got the rewatchability. I've downloaded the torrent yet, having watched it 5 times in the pictures, and don't feel bad about pirating it. And I wait till the Blu-ray comes out. My kids are away on holiday and all that, you know what I mean? So I'm just in the house myself. So I was watching it, and I realised actually the first section where they go after Thanos, and then with the section where they're kind of all meeting up again and how they get on, like all that.
Brilliant.
The bit I don't like is the time heist.
No.
I feel like they waste half an hour of the film just kind of having this Marvel wank over themselves. There could have been so much more done. Infinity War was quite radical in the way that it went about things. Felt like Infinity War Endgame was just a wee bit too up itself and nostalgic. I won't say any more without spoiling everything for anybody under a rock who hasn't seen it.
My only issue is sort of the payoff with Thanos at the end. It wasn't really payoff for me because it wasn't the Thanos that we knew. Even though it was great to see them sort of kill him at the start, it felt like a different person, so you don't feel that connection.
You can see when you begin to watch the movie more and more that a lot of the decisions were made non-service of the characters, but in order to get the MCU to a certain point. And sometimes when stories are led by those needs, they don't hold up to scrutiny. So the 5 years later thing was an interesting thing to throw at an audience first time. But the more you think about it, the more you think, so these characters don't actually have a connection to this bad guy anymore. So this isn't as significant. And so there's there isn't that same weight around it. Also would have liked to have seen the Thor thing handled a wee bit differently.
You didn't like Fat Thor?
It was funny, and then they overplayed it a bit. And I think they were dealing with a lot. You could have he's a good dramatic actor, and I think there was certain points where he's being told really to just kind of goof around. When actually it could have brought a different resonance to the film, particularly given what happened in the previous one.
And he's given a new cosplay to fat people who want to be Thor as well. So
aye, exactly.
The favourite book?
Wow, favourite book. Well, the book that I would say the book that most influenced me over the last couple of years has been The Righteous Mind, by a guy called Jonathan Haidt. So his book really is an analysis of why we find ourselves in these intransigent disagreements with other people based on politics and things like religion or identity. And his whole take is that we we are almost predisposed to develop certain moral viewpoints as a result of where we grow up and our genetics, and that if we in tribal societies, and that if we want to understand, if we want to be persuasive in debate, we have to open ourselves up to the logic of the people we're talking to, and it's about being smart when you do that.
Right.
So, you know, while obviously I'm not conservative really in any way, there are certain conservative figures and writers who I can listen to, and I appreciate the intellectual weft of what they're saying.
Yeah.
But in other instances, I'm not that interested in dialogue. You know, I'm not that interested in talking to a Nazi. I think I can infer enough about a Nazi from history.
Kind of says it in the word Nazi. Anyway.
Aye, so I don't
but like a
think-
literal Nazi, not just the liberal use of the word.
But that book really put into perspective a lot of my sense when I was a bit younger about being right about everything. And I thought, what a tremendous coincidence. So I've been passed down these left-wing beliefs, which also coincidentally align with my self-interest.
Okay.
And also coincidentally, they're always right. And I'm like, wow, how great to be me. And what a coincidence, all my friends are like me.
Right.
And we're all the same.
Okay.
We are the good guys. And suddenly I was like, so this is one of the limits of human nature, that we have all these perceptions and senses of what's going on, and actually there's something else that's happening beyond that. And so it was very illuminating.
Last two, quickly, favourite, your all-time album?
Good question. I mean, if we're talking hip-hop,
Doesn't have to be hip-hop.
well, I mean, there are certain albums that have had a big impact on me, in terms of my own musical direction and journeys. So Pink Floyd, The Wall, which is a very obscure thing to say, not a muso's
But it
choice.
is brilliant because of what it is.
It's because it's a narrative-driven album, and you get that sense listening to it, and it reminded me of Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds, which was one of the first albums that I properly engaged with as a kid. And so a lot of my own work and albums try to replicate that narrative, characters, and even where rap you can go even further and have a plot and character moments and twists and all that. So probably that in terms of I've been getting really back into Radiohead recently.
Oh
as well.
man, some like Kid A, is it Kid A?
Aye.
OK Computer. That album's just amazing.
I find that I actually find that hard to listen to now.
Okay.
Because I used to like OD on that album. You know what I mean? I used to listen to OK Computer and run away from home. I remember running all the way from my granny's in Rough Muscle to the Barhead Dam, and I was sure I was just going to jump in the dam and kill myself. And like so many of my suicide attempts or cries for help or all these crises have began with a piece of music that's put me in a headspace that's isolating and not cathartic, but actually unhealthy. Okay. So that's how good OK Computer is. So I'll tend towards Kid A because I think that there is more optimism in it, even though obviously it's the typical Tom York bleakness that we've all come to expect.
And lastly, favourite quote?
I actually was given a quote the other day, which I think is my new favourite quote. If I had a previously favourite quote, and I will.
So it's always one that kind of stumps people because it's hard. Like, who goes around collecting quotes? Obviously you, but not many other guests I know have are just like, oh.
Wait till you hear this though, and you'll know why I kept it. So this was a letter from Leopold I to a young Queen Victoria, right? The dealings with artists require great prudence. They are acquainted with all classes of society and for that very reason dangerous.
It just shows you the powers that be think
Social
you're dangerous.
mobility, yep.
Thanks for coming on, man.
No
have
problem.
you got anything you want to just promote and say thank you or whatever?
No, just the show's on at the Newtown Theatre all through August from the 2nd to the 26th. I would advise you to get in early and get tickets. A lot of people leave it late and then they end up not being able to come on the night they want to. Yeah. There are plenty of tickets as of today, so go and get them on the Edinburgh Fringe site. Just Google Scotland Today, Darren McGarvey, and it'll pop up. And I would love to see you there. Come and say hello after the show.
I'll have to come along, man, as well. Because I'll be in Edinburgh.
Please do.
Thanks a lot, mate. For everyone listening and watching, thank you again. I will see you next week.